wake up tired. Leaving coffee doesn't help. I wanna set my alarm on fire, but I know that it wouldn't end too well. Would somebody please just help me? I can't quite explain what's happening to me. What's happening to me? Day in, day out. Body's aching all the time now. Every day feels like Groundhog Day. Got me feeling like I'm Bill Murray. Would somebody please just help me? We're figuring out what's happening to me. What's happening to me? Maybe it's 'cause I'm growing Would somebody please just help me? We're figuring out, and I can't quite explain what's happening to me.
Warning: this podcast features adult subject matter, adult language, and things not meant for children to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. You've been warned. We might. We could be. I think we are. We are live. Live, ladies and gentlemen, here on the I'm No Joe YouTube channel with another edition of the, what did I say? Show. The show where I hold us accountable for our choices on the I'm No Joe podcast and give you a little bit of a recap over this weekend's just past combat sports event, whatever it may be. This particular episode, we are talking about this past weekend's Houston, Texas, T-Mobile Arena, UFC 247, Jones versus Reyes, the recap. So, where to even start with this one? There was so much going on during, with, around this card. It was a little bit crazy at some times. And apparently my dog decided he wanted to chew on the bone now when I start recording. Yay, animals. Anyway, so probably the most relevant, quote-unquote, biggest factor, I think, that is going to be or should be talked about around the UFC 247 event was the last-minute injury of Antonio Arroyo. He weighed in, made weight, fight was set shortly afterwards, suffered some medical issues, was rushed to the hospital, was pulled from the card Friday afternoon. Friday, shortly after that, mid-afternoon, early evening, already there to corner one of the other fighters, legitimate badass, James Krause, stepped up, accepted the fight on 20 hours notice, walked directly to the ceremonial weigh-ins, actually weighed in at the ceremonial weigh-ins, made weight, and then the fight was official. So, hats the fuck off to James Krause for taking a 20-hour notice fight. The entirety of his quote-unquote camp for this fight consisted of a 6-hour gym session, Thursday afternoon with the fighter he was cornering, and then a 2-hour quick gym session Friday evening after he made weight for the ceremonial weigh-ins. That's it. And then stepped in to face Trevin Giles, who is no short slouch to be overlooked to begin with, let alone on 20 hours short fucking notice with essentially zero camp like that. So, props to James Krause for that. Now, as far as the actual fights themselves, let me get the card pulled up on my device over here. So, with the Arroyo situation happening, Trevor Giles' fight getting changed, it got kept, but it got moved. So they moved the card around. They added Austin Lingo versus Youssef Zala to the early prelim card, which changed it from all bantamweight to this featherweight fight that opened the card, and then the other two bantamweights on the early prelim card. Overall, the early prelims were kind of meh, mainly because of this initial fight that they added, the Lingo versus Zala fight. It really just was absolutely boring. The two rather casual folks that I was watching the fights with right out of the gate were both just absolutely fucking bored stiff and ready for actual fights, because I had promised them that some of them Saturday night were going to be enjoyable and entertaining, and they absolutely were, but man, did they start out with a fucking yawn. Lucky for us, they did pick up Andre Ewell, who I did call to win, did take his victory. A rather uneventful, but still victory's a victory. Ewell got his win, and then the savior of the early prelim card, Journey Newsom. Again, one that I called to win. Holy shit, did he come out with an absolute barrage and just disintegrate Domingo Pilarte. Absolute stunning KO to close out the early prelims. They moved around, like I said, with the changing of the fights. They did have to do a little moving around. So the first regular prelim card fight we got to see was the Mario Batista versus Miles Johns fight, which would have been the previous closeout for the premier prelim fight on the earlies. They moved it to the first fight on the regular prelims, and holy shit, did that come out and promise some fucking excitement. It was a great back and forth, and then Mario Batista just put this flying knee from nowhere right through Miles Johns' fucking head and ended the whole damn thing. Absolute props to that gentleman. The next fight we didn't even mention on I'm No Joe, because it was essentially... drop my pen, excuse me. This fight was essentially off of our and everyone's radar, that being the debut fight of Chaos Williams versus Alex Morano. Alex Morano's had kind of a rough go the last few times around in the octagon, so fighting against the guy making his debut, we didn't really anticipate a whole lot because there was no real reason to think it was going to be anything special or flashy. Holy shit, were we wrong on that count. Chaos Williams came out and just within the first snap of a blink went into beast mode and absolutely melted. Just flat out melted Alex Morano in decimating fashion here. That's definitely a hell of a debut to be made. Following that up, we had the Lauren Murphy versus Andrea Lee fight. Take a peek back. Let's see. Yeah, no, I called Lauren Murphy to win that one, and she did by decision, but she, in my opinion, looked much better than Andrea Lee did in that fight. The judges actually got that one correct, but we'll get into that a little bit more later on. The Ewell fight was close enough. I think it actually would have went the other way had we had competent judges here. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. Again, incompetent judging came into play the next fight. Trevin Giles versus James Krause. For a man with no training, James Krause came on and just absolutely put it on Trevin Giles. Start to finish, everywhere the fight was. When they were on the feet, Krause was piecing him the fuck up with a beautiful combo that he kept throwing in there. They got it to the ground, and we got to see some brilliant jiu-jitsu from James Krause. Great defense as well. Good work by Trevin Giles, but I don't believe, and neither do a lot of the people, including a lot of the professionals who watch this fight, that Trevin Giles actually won that. I think that is one of the first examples that we saw of Joe Solis, one of the judges in particular, that we'll talk about a little more, asleep at the wheel, as it were. So from there, that brings us to the main card itself. Black Beast versus Iyer Latifi was a lot better of a fight than I think anyone thought it was going to be. Derek Lewis said himself he thought the fight was going to end by controversial decision. He really was not wrong. He actually called this one pretty close. This one actually went to the judges. But it's not the matter of it going to the judges that made it such a big deal. We saw essentially what those of us, because at this point everybody in our little group was there and watching, what we described as someone wearing a Black Beast suit and just performing on a stellar level. We saw 3 flying knees, and I'm not meaning like a little oomph, I mean full force, 100% exertion coming to take your head off. Flying knees from Derek Lewis in this fight, and we saw maybe a dozen total legitimate, snapping, no telegraph, properly thrown and very powerful head kicks, as well as about a half a dozen serious and impactful, noticeably impactful body kicks. Derek Lewis has been clearly working with a legitimate professional and getting some kicks and some jumps into his game. He also came in this time at 261.5, the first time in his professional career he ever weighed in under the 266-pound limit. So this might be the beginning of us legitimately starting to see Derek Lewis take fighting seriously and take his training seriously. And if that's the case, we're going to have a very, very, very problematic Derek Lewis on our hands. And the Black Beast is, I feel, going to make a very legitimate run back at that title very shortly if this is the path that he's on. I think it is, but only time will tell. Moving on from there. Mercedes Bektik versus Dan Ige was an absolute back and forth fucking war. It was a straight up war on the feet. It was a war every time it went to the ground. Those two gentlemen put on one hell of a fight. Ige got the decision at the end. Next fight, moving on from there. You want to talk about a blink and you will miss it fucking moment. Juan Adams came out, seemed like he was gonna be okay for a minute. And then, holy shit, Justin Tafa turned on the power and just absolutely ended his night. Justin Tafa, I feel, has a very bright future if he stays like this. And the scariest thing is that being Mark Hunt's protege is one thing. But then when you go back and you look at him in the octagon and getting his hand raised, and he even legitimately looks like a young Mark Hunt, keep an eye on that young man, because he has got a lot in his future, I feel. And that will bring us to the Lumi's main event, actual card, co-main event here. The Bullet Valentina Shevchenko versus blonde fighter Caitlin Chookagian. Again, just check marks all the way down the board here. We almost got it 100% on the money all the way through this card for what we talked about. This one, it was no exception. Everyone, I think, with the exception of Chookagian's corner, knew coming into this fight that Chookagian isn't the next champion. She's just the next one to fight Valentina. She's essentially ladies' cannon fodder at this point. Sure enough, I don't believe she landed a single significant strike in the entire fight. To her credit, she did get some shots off. Not clean. No, like I said, nothing significant. I don't think Valentina had a single mark on her face at the end of the fight. But silver linings and all. Caitlyn did last longer than Jessica I did with the head kick from hell last time. She did last into the first minute of the third round before Valentina had her stretched one arm up, one arm down, and literally just pounded on her face until the referee went, "Please stop that. She can't defend herself anymore." The best way to describe what happened is the bullet did what the bullet does. People don't think the bullet be like it is, but it do. Bullet Valentina Shevchenko, and I've heard a couple of the MMA journalists who have done their pieces on this card since then say as well, and I agree. Realistically, at this point in the UFC ladies side of things, you have to start looking at the fact that Valentina has essentially completely cleared out the 125-pound division. Amanda Nunes has essentially cleared out the 135-pound division. There never really was a 145-pound division. It's a prop. It's a sham. It's not really a division with 6 ladies in it. But that aside, I am one of the few, the loud, the unabashed believers that both times Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes have fought before, I think Valentina won both fights. And I understand that the judges gave both fights to Amanda, but if you go back and objectively rewatch both of those fights, turn off the commentary altogether, just watch the fights for the fights, it's pretty easy to see, at least for me, that Valentina did much, much more work than Amanda did, got more significant strikes in, stylistically was the better in the matchup in both situations, and I think at this point, we realistically have to start looking at the possibility that we have to find time and place to get Valentina versus Amanda 3 booked and set. I think this is the opportunity that could show the world exactly how dominant Valentina can be, because she's got 125 in her pocket. I don't see her going down to 115. I think that's just too much of a cut for her, but 135 is where she normally would be if not for Amanda anyway, I believe. I think if she takes 135, she could essentially relegate Amanda to the mid-tier status on 135, or just completely staying in 145, because I think legitimately Amanda is not as good as Valentina. I think Valentina would be as dominant at 135 as Amanda has been, if not maybe a little bit more, just because I feel Valentina has a better overall skill set than Amanda does. Amanda might have more power in the striking department, but as a total martial artist, I'm Camp Valentina all the way. But she did exactly what we thought she was going to do, because you can't stop the bullet, man. You just fucking can't. Main event. Lumi's co-main event, as it were, our casual co-main. Dominic Reyes versus John Jones. So much to be said about this fight. The biggest takeaway, aside from everything else we'll get into in a minute, the biggest takeaway for me in this fight was that this was the most quote-unquote human we have seen John Jones in over 10 years. This was a closer fight, in my opinion, than Gustafsson-Jones won. This is the most legitimate test I feel John Jones has had in his professional career, and it was by a gentleman who has never seen a 5th round before last night. Dominic Reyes put Jones legitimately on his ass for the first time in nearly 7 years. He stopped almost every single one of John Jones' takedowns till the very, very end of the fight, and he hit John Jones with some very, very nice shots all over the place while they were wrestling, while they were on the feet, with some kicks, checked some of John's kicks, and it looked like changed his game a little bit as well. John looked more mortal, I guess would be the better description, than ever. I think more than anything, Dominic Reyes came out looking better in the decision for the judges giving it to Jones. And I say giving it for a reason here. This is the biggest fight of the night that the judge Joe Solis was involved in. So Jones got the decision, kept his belt, and still. Through going back and doing a little bit of research, because the information's all been released now that it's Sunday, looking back at the judges' scorecards who have all been turned in, there was 3 different sets of judges throughout the evening. But one judge in particular was a problem all night long, from making just bad calls to, at one point, I kid you not, he was called out by Rogan and Dominic Cruz for it. During a fight that he was judging, he got up from his station. Hang on, I'll finish this in just a second. I gotta take a selfie real quick. There we go. Sorry. This gentleman got up from his judge's station to take a selfie during a fight that he was appointed by the Texas State Athletic Commission to judge, and he took a fucking selfie. The problem with shit like this is that then in the post-fight press conference, we see Dana White come out and he reads the numbers, and he gives literally his softest fucking speech on bad judging that he has ever given. If you look back even just a couple of pay-per-view events ago in a post-fight press conference where there, as there generally always is, some controversial refereeing or judging during the event, Dana, for the most part, will get to that post-fight press conference and he will go the fuck off and call it like he sees it. That's not what we got last night after UFC 247. I will say he stayed calm. He was very measured and very composed in his statement that he made here. But basically what he came out and said was, at this point, the state athletic commissions appoint the judges that oversee fights. UFC, no governing or no organizational body, UFC, Bellator, anybody, has any say in who the judges are that get assigned to your event. The other side of that is that the State Athletic Commission has no sanctioning body. They has no governing body overseeing it. So they are their own boss. They are their own judge. They are their own overseers. There's no one to yell at the state athletic commissions. There's no one to force them to make sure that there are competent judges literally holding the careers and the future of fighters in their hands while they're taking fucking selfies during those fighters having their fight. There's nothing to hold a fighter or to hold a judge rather accountable when everyone, including the fighters, the commentators, the referee, the owner of the organization, random non-fighting celebrities, all see how a fight went. But this particular judge has it scored unexplainably the polar opposite direction. There's no accountability for the travesty that some of these judges are putting into the world of a respectable sport. And it's been suggested, because that's all we can do to these fuckers, is suggest by many, many people much smarter and more popular and more influential than myself. But I will echo it again because I have agreed with it and echoed this sentiment myself since I first started watching combat sports, that the people judging these sports, if it comes to a decision, need to be in some way directly involved in this sport. It's one thing for an analyst like myself to sit back and to watch the fights and to break down what I see from a secondary point of view. It's an entirely different situation for someone who was appointed by the State Athletic Commission and is their legal responsibility to determine how that fight will be decided in the record books and financially, because that's affected by the outcome of the fight as well. These people don't have to have any credentials at all. It's one thing for me to be an armchair quarterback and talk about what happened in the fight, break down the striking, break down how things went. I'm not affecting these guys' livelihood. I'm not affecting their career by giving my criticism of the performance. These judges who were appointed by the state athletic commissions, on the other hand, by improperly and poorly doing their job and reporting bad or incorrect round judges on these fights, can and do absolutely affect these fighters, not only their career by a win-loss ratio, but by their financial future because of a win or loss payout, or a show win payout, or a fight of the night bonus for a win. These fighters' futures, as well as the overall public respect of the sport, are in the hands of incompetent imbeciles with no oversight and no one to hold them accountable. And I don't understand how at this point we don't make it some type of a rule or a legislation, if it needs to be, that people judging a professional sports thing like this need to have been involved in this thing. They should be an ex-fighter. They should be an ex-coach. They should be an ex-referee. They should be an ex-trainer. They should know what they're watching and the seriousness of the events taking place during these fights. And to have people who take it so lightheartedly and so haphazardly that they're willing to take a fucking selfie during a fight that they are legally responsible to determine the outcome of boils my fucking blood to a level that I can't articulately express to anyone listening. And I apologize for going on about this so fucking much, but this is one of those things that gets me so fucking angry and could be solved so simply with just an agreement, an unspoken agreement, a lightly contracted agreement. Make it a fucking piece of legislation if it needs to be. But the type of decisions that we see in quote unquote the best organization for combat sports in the world are becoming a laughable fucking joke. And to fans and analysts like myself who enjoy trying to bring people into the sport, trying to show others why I love this so much, why I get so fucking passionate about it, and having imbeciles like this fucking idiot just demean and downplay the relevance of something like this happening gets me fucking irate. So I'm going to take a second, I'm going to take a drink, and I'm going to take a vape, and we'll get back into it here for just a second. Fucking woosah, as they say. So, the last thing I will say about this incompetent asshat is that through going back myself and looking at all of the scorecards for all of the fights for last night's event personally, one at a time, individually checked rounds, checked fights. I looked at all the fucking scorecards because I needed to know. I needed peace of mind. I'm not going to rely on someone else giving me their journalistic integrity. I wanted to see with my own two fucking eyes. 4 fights on this card were responsible for Joe Solis, whatever the fuck his name is. One of them was the Tafa fight, which resulted in a knockout. He didn't have to fucking do anything there. Of the other 3 that he actually had to give his input on, 2 of those 3 he got arguably wrong from the most casual of fucking casual standpoints. I don't understand how someone with that little ability is so openly allowed to stay in such an important position like that. But I hope, for their sake, the Texas State Athletic Commission takes a real fucking close look at their judges pool and does some very drastic house cleaning real soon, or I don't think we're going to see the UFC come back to Texas anytime soon. Certainly not with any kind of a title defense, knowing that this is the kind of bullshit we've got. Even Dana himself said he had the fight 3-2 for Reyes. I'm not saying this fight was a blowout. I'm not saying it's a runaway. What I'm saying is that this is beyond incompetent judging that we saw determining the future of a championship. And in doing so, the silver lining, as it were, if there is a silver lining to a dumpster fire like this, is that in his, air quotes, victory last night, John Jones became, or excuse me, he broke the record for the most defenses in the light heavyweight division. So apparently he went backstage and cried a little bit about it because it's a historic moment. You know, good for you, I suppose. At this point, I am essentially completely off the John Jones train. I can't deny that he is a good fighter. He absolutely is, and he realistically is in the conversation for pound best. But he has become one of the biggest douche canoes a human being can essentially devolve into, in my opinion. And I can't root for that motherfucker in any way, shape, or form. My morals will not let me. But what are you going to do? I'm not the guy climbing in the cage. I'm the guy watching it on TV. So I analyze, I break it down, and I bring it to you, fine folks. But with that, that's going to be all we have for this fine evening. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I would like to thank all you fine folks who did pop into the chat and hang out live with me here. With this being the end, I would say this. If you've enjoyed the show, if I gave you some things to think about here... Oops. My phone's ringing as I'm trying to go. There we go. Anyways. If I gave you some things to think about, if I entertained you, if I made you giggle a little bit, give me a thumbs up. If I gave you a new point of view, if I brought an opinion here that you can value, maybe subscribe. If I really just tickled your funny bone, share an episode of the show. We're trying to grow this damn thing. But on the other side of that coin, if I'm just some dipshit sitting in front of his camera talking out his ass, not knowing what the fuck I'm actually speaking about,
Hey, where are the white women at?
find out where the white women at. Give me a thumbs down. I won't dispute it because I earned it. That being said, we're going to call it all for now. Remember, don't let ignorance stop you. You can root for anything. Unless it's a determination of Epstein killing himself, but you already know that at this point, so have a good night.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. But they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up, they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a slip, and a kicking from the hip. Everybody